Women's Film Toronto Film Festival. That's where I showed Integration Report 1 in 1973. So it was like going back home again.
Awesome.
It was the first time I saw it. I Am Somebody with Dolby Sound. And it was so fabulous to see it on the big screen with Dolby Sound. How do I look, Tracy? Am I okay?
Let me double check. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I want to see the necklace. Yeah, you look fine.
Okay.
There's
Or should I?
your mic is right here. No, you're fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Have any food on my mouth?
No. Do you want lipstick? You're fine, right?
You're gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm. Bring that down a little bit. Okay, so let me get my levels. Test 1, 2, and then give me your level, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Great, great. Wait, I'm hearing. Okay, yeah, that's normal.
You okay?
I just want to make sure that I'm not bleeding into your soundtrack.
Oh,
As
okay.
well. So can you see me okay, or should I lean
No,
over?
am I looking at you or looking at the camera?
Either, whatever you're more comfortable with. I'm staring at you though.
Okay.
Well, I mean, thanks for doing this, Queen. I guess the first thing we need, if you could look into the lens, say your name, and you're watching Real Black.
My name is Madeline Anderson, and you're watching Real Black.
Okay, I stepped on your line though. Can you give it to me again, please?
My name is Madeline Anderson, and you are watching Real Black.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. All right, so I've had a full day. I was watching earlier. I was at the Paley Museum. I was looking for some of your work, and I came across William Greaves' Still a Brother. So I was watching that, and then to see Integration Report, it's like a full day for me of getting all this stuff. So, yeah, legendary first African-American woman to direct a documentary.
Well, the first film that I made, I became the first. But then when I made I Am Somebody, I became the first who was in a film industry. That's the difference between the two. When I made Integration Report 1, I started out at the top as the producer. But then, as I progressed in learning about film and wanting to express myself through film and wanting to stay in the industry, once I couldn't get money to produce and direct films, I decided to get into a film union.
And
at that time, there was one African American woman in the film, her name, in the film industry, Local 771, her name was Hortense Beveridge. She was the first. And then I was the second.
so, in the Q&A, you were telling the story of how you got interested in film. I mean, that was a big dream for someone born in the late 20s to want to be a part of this. I mean, what made you, when did you first get interested in film, and then at what moment did you feel like this is something that can happen for me?
Well, when I was about 7, I was the oldest girl, and I had an older brother. And my mother used to let us go to the movies every Saturday. We used to take our lunch, an apple and a couple of Mary Janes, and we would stay in the movies all day. The only stipulation was that we had to be home by dark. So the way that we stayed in the movies all day is in between shows, we used to go into the bathrooms And then when the shows began, we would come out. We weren't the only ones who did that. There were a lot of kids who did that. And I knew the ushers knew that was going on, but they just looked the other way. I loved films. And although I didn't see images that I was proud of, that I could identify with and say, gee, I want to be like that person. And also, because this was such a treat for us to go to the movies, when we came home, we used to reenact what we saw in the movies. And no one wanted to be the Africans. They didn't want to be the Africans because the Africans weren't smart. They were easily fooled. They didn't know how to dress. And we didn't want to be, no one wanted to be the Africans. I always wanted to be the director. But of course, I didn't always win.
Well, let's talk about that time period because, you know, I mean, there were images of black folks in movies other than Tarzan. I mean, you had, you know, like you're 7 or 8, you're born in 27, so early 30s, you had people like Stepin Fetchit and Willie Best. I mean, you didn't think much of those?
We didn't see them because we were seeing children's shows.
Okay.
So we saw Westerns and we saw Tarzan and the Apes. And later on, Flash Gordon. We didn't see the feature films.
Okay.
We saw the children's films.
Okay. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of time. I'd love to catch up with you again. So fast forward to the 50s. So you end up in New York?
Well, once I dropped out of college and decided that I really didn't want to be a teacher after all, I really wanted to be a filmmaker. And of course, everybody thought that was very foolish. And but I didn't. And I was determined that I would try at least to get into the film industry. And so I got a partial scholarship to NYU, and I came to New York. My mother had a sister who lived in Brooklyn, and she promised to watch over me. And so I came to New York. I got a couple of jobs.
It's around what year?
54. I think 54.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Were you interested in narrative at that point? Like you just...
No, I always wanted to make films that taught people something. I always wanted to let our people know about our achievements. Because in addition to loving movies, I like to read. And so I would go to the library and I would read about what black people were doing. We didn't have Black History Month at that time. We had Black History Week. And so we were given assignments, and year after year, I learned more and more about Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and George Washington Carver. Those were the 3 people that I learned about, and in classroom. But then after that, I would go to the library, and I would find out about a black surgeon. And so I would get this knowledge, and I would want to tell everybody, hey, you know,
And your first film
we're a
was?
people of achievement.
Your first film was?
My first film,
Like well, you started out. I mean, what was the first time you actually got behind the camera and you shot something of your own?
Integration Report 1.
Okay.
That was the first film I did. And it was a film that was events that happened from, I guess, 56 through 58. And you saw in Brooklyn, it was in the aftermath of the Ocean Hill-Brownsville. That was the school integration. You saw the police brutality, which was forever. And you saw Martin Luther King coming to Hunter College. These were all events that happened in that time period.
Well, what most impressed me about your work is that, when we go and it's Black History Month, we're taught Frederick Douglass and George Washington Carver and Martin Luther King, but it's always from some sort of docile, passive perspective. We don't always get to hear about Mr. Williams, who wanted to fight back with arms, or even like some of the speeches of Malcolm X that you include in your piece. And I think some of that was lost over time in terms of like what the struggle was, or I should ask you, what was the struggle at that time? Was it for civil rights or equal rights?
Well, the struggle was the same as it is today. It was for equality in education and housing, jobs, and against police brutality. Mm-hmm. Has anything changed?
I'm asking you.
No, it hasn't. We're still fighting and for those same things. And also, oddly enough, to be recognized as human beings. You see the Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and your films are coming back at the same time that James Baldwin is nominated for an Academy Award, and the 13th, talking about the prison industrial system. It seems like we're on the verge of another sort of awakening. Do you feel that way?
I don't think we're on the verge of another awakening. I think that we're beginning to realize that the struggle always continues. And we maybe, I'm not sure, I'm not going to say this for sure, but maybe we thought we were further ahead than we were. Mm. And we didn't continue. Mm. But we're further than we were.
Absolutely.
But there's still a lot of work to be done. And we have to be conscious. Just because we had a Black president, that didn't mean that all the problems were going to be solved. Because he was the president for everybody. And although he was criticized roundly for not doing enough for Black people, I think history will show that he did a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm. So, it's always a privilege to speak to an elder. I mean, especially someone involved in the struggle. So, if we're talking about incremental progress, so from the time that you were a child, I mean, what types of oppression were you witnessing in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that made you want to turn the camera on the civil rights movement? Or was it just a matter of you always wanted to make films and civil rights start to blossom at that time?
Well, I used my skills to not just make films about civil rights, but everything that I did, I can say, had an element in it that was bringing our people forward. Even when the Children's Television Workshop sent me to the Middle East, they got a grant from USAID to make films in the Middle East, 5 countries in the Middle East, teaching women and children 7 years old English as a second language. Can you imagine? Mm-hmm. That was when everybody in the Middle East liked us. I got to go there because along the way, when I was trying to get into the union, one of my undercover jobs was syncing up dailies of foreign language dailies. Not that I knew the language, but I knew the lips, and I could do the lip sync. And so I developed a kind of understanding of other languages. And that's why I went when I was working at the Television Workshop, I made a film in Portuguese called Sesame Street is Everywhere. And that, you see, the skills that you make, you can use them to do other things that you never thought you could do. Whatever, you know, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg here. But I did want to share, I just wanted to take time to share with our viewers your story. So for filmmakers out now who want to, like, continue what you were doing in terms of, like, continuing to carry the torch, point the camera at ourselves, allow us to see ourselves. I mean, what words of advice, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm a documentary filmmaker. That's the kind of films that I wanted to make. I never wanted to make a Hollywood film with actors. I always wanted to make documentary films. And so for documentary filmmakers, the advice I would give would be to be true to your subject. Sometimes people make documentaries and they turn into docudramas. That's not being a documentary filmmaker. So I would say stay true to the experience that you're making the film about. And it'll be, you know, it'll be an effective tool. All of the films that I made, for instance, Integration Report 1, after I made it so that we would know what black people were doing all over the country. So I had this wild idea that I was going to be making 2, 3, 4, you know. But when I found out I wasn't going to be doing that, I then decided to get into the union. And I would say to young people that are making films today, being a part of the union is very important. Unions are losing their power because of right-to-work laws, but I would say get into a union, because that is where you will be able to not only make a living, but to grow as a professional. When I was looking at the Academy Awards recently, and I saw who was winning awards for set designers, sound editors. I didn't see any black faces. So it means that we are still not in those unions. We're not in those unions. Although a black woman did edit Moonlighting, but we're still not in the industry.
So something to continue. So, Jake, is there anything I should have asked that?
No, I mean that's great. This is actually Madeline's car. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So your cars are. Can you give me 20 seconds on I Am Somebody and maybe 10 seconds on Cool World?
The Cool World.
Yeah, I know you worked on that. That's a great film.
Oh yeah, with Shirley Clark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your cars. Okay.
All right, working on The Cool World, I didn't work. I got into the union by working on The Cool World. The Cool World was edited by Shirley Clark and a very wonderful African-American man whose name is Hugh Robertson. And Hugh was in the union. The Cool World was made with union employees because Shirley wanted to get it into theaters, and so it had to have a union symbol. And because of Hugh Robertson's generosity, he was able to get me an application to Local 771, and that's how I got into the union.
Okay. Well, we'll pick it up. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, sweetheart. All right. And